Hello, it's David from David Savoury Electrical Services Limited, and this is the first of 3 videos where I delve into the toolbox, my having 3 toolboxes that I carry around on the van to take to site on any given day. And now this may be of use to those of you who are watching who are looking to break into the industry and wonder what kind of tools you may need in order to get through your day. Similarly, it may also be of use to those of you who already are in the industry and just like looking at tool porn. No judgments here, you oddballs. But by the same token, those of you who are in the industry may recognise that I'm missing something, some kind of tool that gets you through your working day a little bit quicker and into the pub sooner, in which case I'm all ears in the comments section below. So without further ado, we'll go in size order, from the Fluke box through the Stanley Tote Toolbox in the next video, and finally to the Stanley Roller box. Okay, so an admission here. I've talked about the Fluke box and its contents on a previous video a couple of years ago with some crappy audio qualities, so anybody who has poked around on this channel before may feel a little shortchanged. But that video was more about the Fluke box itself, still the best case on the market regardless of whether it actually contains a Fluke instrument or not, as indeed mine doesn't, as I have a Metrol stuffed inside it here. But here today I'll be looking at the actual individual up-to-date contents of my Fluke case in more detail. The Fluke box for me is my go-to fault-finding case. When called out for a nuisance RCD trip, for example, this may be the only box I need to whip off the van. Now, there are a couple of omissions you may point out following this video. For example, you won't see a VDE terminal screwdriver or a non-contact voltage tester in here, but those items I keep on my tool belt along with a Sharpie, a pencil, a small spirit level, a tape measure and an LED torch. So certain items are about my person and are readily to hand at all times. Obviously, in the main body of my case, if I open it up here, is my multifunction tester, my Metrol MI3100S, although it could just as easily have been my Mega or Fluke, which have each resided in the box in previous years. The main body of the case contains this instrument plus the cables and also a proving unit for safe isolation. Nothing surprising there. So let's have a look at what's in the tote tray and under the top flap. You know, I feel I should get a joke in here about tools and flaps. No, I've got nothing. Sorry. Okay, moving swiftly on. Let's start with the bigger items like the contact voltage tester. Now, I know I've been a bit sniffy about a couple of items of TIS kit in previous videos, but there are some TIS items in my toolboxes which are very good at what they do, and one of them is the TIS 845. No need for me to go into great depth on this as I showed it on my safe isolation video, but if I pop it onto my proving unit, you can see it has both LED and LCD displays, it has audible feedback, and also it serves as an ohm meter and a continuity tester. So it's a jolly capable bit of kit. It's got a torch on there as well, incidentally. And in fact, I often use this, at least for basic fault finding, in preference to the more cumbersome Metrol. You may notice that in its current form here, it doesn't comply with GS38, which states probe tips should be exposed no more than 4mm. But I find that too often to be a pain in the arse. You just can't shove them into some terminals with the shrouds present, and I keep misplacing them when I take them off site. So rightly or wrongly, I've started leaving them off by default. In fact, they're hidden away in here. They're stowed in this compartment for easy access should I need them. Okay. Also of note from the TIS stable is the TIS 870, which has 2 parts and 3 functions. This bit works as a non-contact tester. If I switch it to NCV there, we have visual and audible indication of a voltage there on that cable. I rarely use it as such, to be honest, being permanently armed as I am with my Fluke Volt Alert, surely the king of non-contacts. Although, you know, these Q-Tech Q-Stick Geos have a rather nice two-tone sound to them. So that's interesting. Secondly, the plug-in partner to this bit is this bit, which acts as a basic socket tester. If I just plug that in there, There we go. So that gives us audible and visual feedback, which is useful for quickly spotting missing earths and line neutral reverses on socket outlets. And while these two items each have their individual uses, put them together and you have a rather useful fuse wayfinder. Allow me to demonstrate. Okay, with the socket tester, if I plug that in here, we can see that it's doing its test function, but if I switch it from socket test to breaker find, then we have a red light come on. Now if I take the other end of this here and switch it into find mode, starting at the main switch on the distribution board or consumer unit and running it along down the breakers, you'll notice it beeps when I get to the one that this thing is transmitting on. So I can tell that this is the circuit I need to isolate in order to work upon it, which reduces the risk of me switching off the wrong circuit. Especially useful if I'm in an unfamiliar property where the labelling is poor and there's not any documentation to tell me which circuit I'm supposed to be working on. Also in here is my clamp meter, an almost no brand Handyman Tech 775, although you can also find exactly the same thing branded as an Amacal ST9810, an Ethos 3650, a Dialog DL6518, and goodness knows what other flavour from the same production line, but it's a neat size and has a good scale ranges, making it handy for reading earth leakage, which is a function my Metrol tester and bigger brand clamp meters lack. Again, I talked about this a little in my Klein clamp meter video, and I showed it in use on my Curious Fault 1 video, so I won't flog it too much here. Suffice to say that an earth leakage clamp meter is a jolly handy thing to accompany the multifunction tester in this box. Moving on, the Q-Tech R2 unit, which all sounds very Star Wars, but is nowhere near as exciting. However, it does allow me to connect my tester's probes to a socket outlet. Obviously the tester does have a socket lead, but this allows me some flexibility of where I attach the probes. I like how they optimistically say on there, I don't know if you can see that, only for use with Q-Tech products, or for use with Q-Tech products only rather. It makes me feel rather renegade when I plug my Metrol into it. Don't tell Q-Tech of my naughtiness, will you? Okay, what else? Yes, hiding under here we have a basic LED torch. Okie dokie. With a magnetic base. When I first started in business, I bought one of those stud cable finders, which was made by Ryobi, and as with all stud cable finders, it was pretty hopeless. But it had a rechargeable battery, and it came with a battery charger as well, so rather than just let the thing degrade from lack of use, I bought this LED torch second hand, as it can use the same battery. It actually came faulty, but rather than send it back, I popped it open and found a loose wire, which brought the thing back to life when soldered into place. It's not terribly bright, that's adjustable, which is nice. But the battery seems to last forever, and it's better than nothing when you're in a dark broom cupboard trying to get the lights back on. Normally sitting on top of the torch is one of these notebooks that the IET give away free on their stand each year at LX. This one has been in here for 2.5 years, hence its somewhat scruffy condition compared to this new one that I skanked from this year's show, which is nice and pristine for the moment. This book, plus a biro in the tray, allows me to scribble down test numbers and customer contact details when out on site for later transferal to the computer back at the office. It's really for the minor works results, such as an EICR I would normally fill out on site using EasyCert. But when on an in and out job and in a hurry, or even on one where I may be, which may be ongoing, so I need to keep track of what tests I've done, well, it's easier to just jot something down for later. I have to be, let's see if we can have a look in here. I have to be a bit careful. I'm going to do this off camera. I have to be careful what I show you in here, because there'll be notes showing identifiable client data on many of the pages, and I don't want to fall foul of my own GDPR and privacy policy, which bizarrely is one of the most popular pages on my website, if you can figure that out. This page here looks pretty safe. Let's have a quick look at the kind of garbage I jot down here. My handwriting is actually rather quite neat normally, but when scribbling stuff down on site, it looks like a party of spiders have been doing the hokey cokey in ink or something on here. It's so sorry about that. It looked pretty awful. What do we got here? You know what? I remember this job. This was the last job we did before Christmas last year. And this shows a downlight arrangement we put in, and it's telling me here, showing me the measurements of where to find, where to re-drill the holes once the ceiling's replastered, and we return in January minus the, or rather the hangover from Christmas and New Year. We've also got a materials list here, and we've got some test results on this second page here. Looks like some what have we got? It looks like some ZS and RCD times. In fact, this one here, it's the start of a data for an EIC. We've got a ZE, PFC, PSCC, and various of the tests. Can't see any IR readings, so I imagine the IRs were all off scale as they should be, or as you would expect to be in a perfect circuit. It's only obviously going to note down anything that's less than ideal on here. And obviously at the end of the day, or at the end of the week at the latest, hopefully the data on here gets transferred onto the computer back at the office for creating the certificates or whatever. I have to do it while it's still fresh in my head. If I leave it too long, then I'll be there going, oh crikey, what on earth did that mean again? There's stuff that's not listed here, things like the particulars of the supply in this particular job or whatever, but obviously, I just say they're TNCS. Obviously, that sort of stuff I'll hopefully remember it while it's still fresh in my head, and then I'll get the certificates drawn up. Anyway, there's only so much you can say about a notebook, but it's handy to have. Okay, so besides pens and crocodile clips for the Metral, there's two other items of note in here, one of which is this CK utility meter tool. If I swing this out, we have a couple of different style keys on the sides there. Okay. I must admit, use that much because I have on my key ring here a long reach meter key, which gets me into most meter boxes that I need to be in. And the last item is a rather expensive VDE Armeg torque screwdriver, which is mainly used to ensure screw terminals on consumer unit equipment are torqued to the correct level. I bought this in kit form with multiple interchangeable bits, but I tend to only carry around these two. You can see it just pops out there and plops back in. And I've got a tool in the top here, which allows me to adjust the setting of the torque level on the screwdriver. Okay, jolly good. Now, while we've got this open, a few things to quickly look at in the top flap compartment then. Obviously we've got insulated crock clips for doing our R1, R2, our R1, RN testing, that sort of thing. Metral's probes are also in here. Annoyingly, the green GS38 end went missing for weeks, and I only just found it again this very week when we returned to an ongoing site. But in the last fortnight, I've lost the buggering brown tip, for goodness sake. Such pesky things. I'm always having to keep track of them, and I'm going to have to try and source a replacement for that now before my next NIC assessment in February. What else have we got in here? We've got an LED torch. I mentioned earlier that I carry one about my person at all time. Have I got that in here, or have I? Oh yeah, here we go. Which is this thing here. That's the one I keep my tool about. It's fairly hefty and very bright. It's also got this slidey section here. It's a good bit of kit, that. But I find sometimes it's a bit too bright, a bit too dazzling. So it's handy to have something that's a bit less luminous, if you like. Which this LED Lenser A4 achieves. So that's handy to keep in there as an alternative should I need it. There's fuse wire in here, of course. Not something you need very often these days, but still essential to have. There are still rewirable fuse boxes out there. And finally, apart from some odds and sods that have crept in here, we have a couple of lock-off devices and their associated padlocks and keys. Again, in my safe isolation video, I covered these in more detail, but this red one here pretty much covers my lock-off needs in most domestic settings, at least. The lock-off notice itself, it's got to have a lock-off sign, of course. Well, that lives in the bottom of the case here, and again, that's another freebie from Alex, as I've shown before. Right, jolly good. And there we go, that's about as much as I can physically shoehorn into the flute case. But is there something I'm missing? Some indispensable gadget that would be fit in right at home here? Obviously, there are more tools in the main toolbox which we'll look at next time, including a more comprehensive socket tester, VDE cutters, pliers, screwdrivers and so on. But from a diagnostic toolkit point of view, if you've got a suggestion for any additional toys that would fit in here that I can add to my Christmas list, then do pop me a comment below. So see you next time when we open up the Stanley Tote Box. I hope you can contain your excitement.